Hello, and welcome to the midweek episode of Views of an Outsider, The Outsider's View from March 9th. This was quite a week for Democrats. The former governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, announced that he was throwing his hat into the ring to be the next mayor of New York City. In 2021, he was forced to resign as governor over allegations of sexual harassment made by nearly a dozen women, allegations which he strongly denied. His mishandling of COVID also greatly marred his reputation, but New Yorkers don't seem to be very picky when it comes to the quality of the people they choose to put in charge of their city, and that has always worked out really well for them. Meanwhile, in that same city, James Dehaney, the head of the FBI's New York field office, was forced out of the bureau on Monday. Dehaney's expulsion came only weeks after he sent an email to his staff encouraging them to dig in as the Trump administration probed the FBI investigation into the Capitol riot of January 6th. NBC News was told that Dehaney was directed to resign or be fired. On the other side of the country in California, the multimillionaire Politico-Democrat activist Joseph Sandberg, who fancies himself an economic social justice crusader, was arrested Monday on suspicion of conspiring to defraud the investors of his green finance company. Joseph McNally, the acting U.S. attorney for the Central District of California, said, Joseph Neil Sandberg, 45, of Orange, the co-founder and largest shareholder of the financial and sustainability services company Aspiration Partners, Inc., was arrested today on a federal criminal complaint alleging that he conspired to defraud two investor funds of at least $145 million. And in the domain of the internet, the dogpiling for Democrats continued. A promotional video, which featured female Democrats performatively posing in fight stances, as the theme music from the Super Smash Bros. Video game played in the background, was released and then promptly trashed by critics. The TikTok video showed each woman shadowboxing, which looked like a bunch of girls who don't know how to fight, bouncing around preparing for a pillow fight, as they each boasted a list of their self-proclaimed stats. It started with influencer Solhee Jessica Wu, who had superimposed angel wings onto herself, listing her stats as bento box queen, mommy of the century, sleep deprived. Her post also included hashtags Women's History Month, hashtag Women Who Fight, hashtag Fighter, hashtag Save Democracy, and hashtag Girl Power. AOC appeared next with her stats boasting New York's 14th Congressional District, youngest woman plus Latino to be elected to the House, Trekkie. Next was Lauren Underwood with the stats youngest black woman ever elected to Congress, co-founded the Black Maternal Office, hates balloons. The video also included Catherine Clark with the stats of being from Massachusetts' 5th Congressional District and noting that she was not into hair dye. Judy Chu, who was described as the first Chinese-American woman elected to Congress, noted that she was too sweet. She was followed by Jasmine Crockett, who chose the stats Texas 30th Congressional District Public Defender Plus Attorney, not a morning person. The video concluded with Susie Lee from Nevada's 3rd Congressional District, who is President of Communities in Schools of Nevada, and apparently she has 2 sprained fingers. The internet was not impressed, however, and their critics made that clear in their responses on X. Mark Hemingway sighed, I literally wrote a piece this morning, headlined, Democrats' biggest problem right now is that they are out of touch and uncool. I rest my case. Senator Ted Cruz responded to the video by posting an application for clown college. The former White House press secretary, Sean Spicer, could only manage, oh my goodness. Another person asked, Why can't they just be normal? Tom Bevan posted, "This is nuts. Dems are getting terrible political advice. As Elon Musk says, this is not rocket science. It's politics 101, and the Dems are failing." Jim Henson agreed. "The Democrats have ceased to be anything more than performative activism by unserious people." CNN's Scott Jennings despaired altogether, saying, "This cannot possibly be real." While Cher Michael Singleton said, "Choose your fighter, laughing my ass off. Just know if you choose any of these characters, you're about to get your butt kicked. I'm just saying." However, the best response came from Olivia Rondeau, who declared, "All right, repeal the 19th, referencing the constitutional amendment that gave women the right to vote." But leftist tears didn't only flow online. They flooded Congress as well, when the Republican-led Senate voted 51 to 45 to confirm Linda McMahon as the Secretary of the Education Department, an agency that Trump has openly said that he wants to dismantle in favor of giving that power back to the states so that they can run their own schools. In other good news, President Trump revealed the numbers for illegal alien encounters last month, saying, "The month of February, my first full month in office, had the lowest number of illegal immigrants trying to enter our country in history, by far. There were only 8,326 apprehensions of illegals by Border Patrol at the U.S.-Mexico border, all of whom were quickly ejected from our nation or, when necessary, prosecuted for crimes against the United States of America. This means that very few people came. The invasion of our country is over. In comparison, under Joe Biden, there were 300,000 illegal crossings in 1 month, and virtually all of them were released into our country." But there was more immigration news. The Department of Justice announced that 4 illegal aliens from Guatemala had been captured who were part of a massive smuggling ring that had trafficked 20,000 people into the United States. They could now face the death penalty for their trafficking operation, which resulted in the death of several migrants. One of those arrested, Helmer Obispo Hernandez, allegedly threatened to cut off the heads of a Homeland Security officer and members of his family after his residence was searched by federal authorities. Later in the week, a 35-year-old Russian national listed as a known or suspected terrorist allegedly attempted to bite off a deportation officer's pinky as he was being apprehended in downtown Los Angeles. Rabies? Then on Friday afternoon, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, made an announcement concerning the government officials who were responsible for leaking DHS's deportation plans, saying, "We have identified 2 leakers of information here at the Department of Homeland Security who have been telling individuals about our operations and putting law enforcement lives in jeopardy. We plan to prosecute these 2 individuals and hold them accountable for what they've done. We're going to continue to do all that we can to keep America safe." On other battlefields of the culture wars, numerous female athletes, some of which were teenagers, refused to compete against the 21-year-old male transgender runner Sadie Schreiner during this weekend's USA Track and Field Open Masters Championships. Good for you. Either we all play fair, or he can play alone. In related news, the former female volleyball player Peyton McNabb was invited to be one of the special guests who attended President Trump's State of the Union address to Congress on Tuesday. A press release from the Office of the First Lady read, "Peyton is a former high school athlete who had her dreams of competing in college sports crushed in a September 2022 volleyball match when a biological man playing on the opposing women's team spiked the volleyball at Peyton's face, leaving her with a traumatic brain injury. Peyton joined the Independent Women's Forum and has made it her mission to put an end to this brutal unfairness. Later, as she sat beside the Second Lady, Usha Vance, President Trump promised Peyton during his address that schools who endanger girls like her in the future by refusing to kick biological men out of women's sports will lose all of their federal funding, and he cited other egregious instances of men being allowed to cheat and degrade female athletes, given that they were too mediocre for success when made to compete fairly among their own. In many instances, this also resulted in serious injuries to their female opponents. Democrats voted down the bill that would permanently enshrine into law the temporary ban on biological men who have been competing in women's sports that was put into place with an executive order. On the other hand, insanely far-left Gavin Newsom went public in support of not allowing this unfair situation to continue, which earned him the unanimous censure of his own party. 7 people have been indicted for the torture and killing of a woman who identified as trans. All 7 were charged with the first-degree murder of 24-year-old Sam Norquist, and they now face life without parole. They were also charged with second-degree murder, kidnapping, and conspiracy. One of the 7 suspects, Precious Arzuga, is also charged with coercion after it was discovered that she allegedly forced 2 children, ages 7 and 12, to participate in the torture. After the indictment on Wednesday, Assistant District Attorney Kelly Wolford said, "Our state no longer has the death penalty, but prior to the death penalty being struck down, this would have been a death penalty charge. It's heartbreaking. We have a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old who are also victims. They may have been forced to participate, but their lives are forever changed by what they saw and endured in there." No one has been charged with a hate crime because at least some of the accused are also members of the LGBTQ community. What an awful story. Honda has decided to produce their next-generation Civic Hybrid in Indiana rather than in Mexico in order to avoid the tariffs that the United States put into place at the start of this week. President Trump told reporters on Monday that the tariffs on Canada and Mexico would go into effect the following day, adding that there was no possibility of the countries making a deal before the midnight deadline. Trump's 25% tariffs on each country were initially set to go into effect in early February, but the president pushed the date back after the Canadian Prime Minister and the Mexican president agreed to send more troops to the border to help stop the flow of illegal migrants and illegal drugs into the United States. Trump also increased the tariffs on China by 10% after having already imposed a 10% tariff on imports from the communist country in February. In response to all of this, the Dow Jones Industrial dropped by 1.48%, the NASDAQ Composite fell by 2.64%, and the S&P 500 slid by 1.5%. Trump has expressed hopes that the tariffs will bring manufacturing, along with jobs, back to the United States, saying that companies, such as car manufacturers, need to build their car plants in the United States, in which case you will have no tariffs. Then on Tuesday, when the tariffs imposed by President Trump on Mexican, Canadian, and Chinese imports took effect, the Mexican president, following the lead of Canada and China, announced that Mexico would retaliate with tariffs on U.S. exports. A fact sheet that had noted there is also a growing presence of Mexican cartels operating fentanyl and nitazene synthesis labs in Canada, both nations' failure to arrest traffickers, seize drugs, or coordinate with U.S. law enforcement constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to America's security, demanding EPA action to force accountability and protect American lives. Sheinbaum, the president of Mexico, called the fact sheet offensive, defamatory, and without support, adding, "We collaborate to avoid illegal drug trafficking to the United States, but as we have said on multiple occasions, that country's government must take responsibility, too, for the crisis of opioid consumption that has caused so many deaths in the United States." Canada also responded with retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods, so Trump threatened that Canada would now face an even higher tariff. Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said on Tuesday that Trump's decision to impose tariffs on its neighbors is a very dumb thing to do. In a Truth Social post, Trump responded, "Please explain to Governor Trudeau of Canada that when he puts on a retaliatory tariff on the U.S., our reciprocal tariff will immediately increase by like amount." Axios reported that Canada immediately imposed a 25% tariff on $30 billion worth of American goods. According to Trudeau, another $125 billion worth of U.S. products will be hit with a 25% tariff at the end of this month. The Canadian Prime Minister also addressed the American people directly on Tuesday, saying, "Your government has chosen to put American jobs at risk at the thousands of workplaces that succeed because of materials from Canada, or because of consumers in Canada, or both." No, Justin. Americans succeed because of Americans, and Canadians are struggling by on half of their income because of you. On Thursday, President Trump announced that he would pause the tariffs on Mexico following a call with that country's president. After speaking with President Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, I have agreed that Mexico will not be required to pay tariffs on anything that falls under the USMCA agreement. This agreement is until April 2nd. I did this as an accommodation and out of respect for President Sheinbaum. Our relationship has been a very good one, and we are working hard together on the border, both in terms of stopping illegal aliens from entering the United States and likewise stopping fentanyl. Thank you to President Sheinbaum for your hard work and cooperation. Mexico's president responded by saying that she was thankful for Trump's actions. We had an excellent and respectful call in which we agreed that our work and collaboration have yielded unprecedented results within the framework of respect for our sovereignties. We will continue to work together, particularly on migration and security issues, which include reducing the illegal crossing of fentanyl into the United States, as well as weapons into Mexico. Also in the economic realm, Bitcoin surged past $93,000 last weekend after President Trump announced his plan to create a U.S. strategic crypto reserve that will include Bitcoin, Ether, and several other digital currencies. On Sunday, President Trump posted on Truth Social, "I will make sure the U.S. is the crypto capital of the world. We are making America great again." Also, the CEO of Taiwan's semiconductor manufacturing company, CCWay, announced at the White House on Monday that his company will invest at least $100 billion in chip manufacturing plants in the United States over the next several years. In other foreign news, one person was killed and 4 more were injured when a 20-year-old Druze Arab Israeli reportedly began stabbing victims after exiting a bus in Haifa, Israel. The killer suffered from mental illness, according to his family members, but he was shouting Allahu Akbar before he began to stab his fellow passengers. A truly gutsy Yemeni Arab journalist blasted the UN and its fellow Israel haters after the UN High Commissioner condemned Israel for its war against Hamas. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, declared, "Nothing justifies the appalling manner in which Israel has conducted its military operation in Gaza, which consistently breached fundamental principles of international humanitarian law." That prompted Yemeni journalist Louis Ahmed, who was invited to speak by UN Watch, to fire back. "High Commissioner, my name is Louis Ahmed, and I come from Yemen. I asked the UN, the Arab League, and everyone who has been raising the Palestinian flag since October 7th, where is the flag of Yemen? In my country, 500,000 people have died in the last 10 years, the biggest famine and humanitarian crisis in modern history. Why does no one care when 500,000 Yemenis die? What about Sudan? In less than 2 years, more than 150,000 people have been killed. Where is the flag of Sudan? What about Syria? 500,000 Syrians have been killed. Where is the Syrian flag? High Commissioner, why is it that when Arabs kill millions of Arabs, no one bats an eye? Where is the outrage? And where are the protests? Why don't you mention the Houthis in Yemen, who have spent millions of dollars firing missiles at Israel instead of feeding my starving people? May I ask why your report mentions Israel 188 times, yet fails to mention the Islamic regime in Iran even once? How can you speak about the conflict while ignoring the party that has armed, trained, and funded terrorist proxies like Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, who have been bombing Israel thousands of times? And why is Qatar sitting here as a member of the Humanitarian Rights Council when they host the Hamas terror leaders in luxury hotels? Respect, dude. Hats off to you. In another move that I applaud, President Trump issued what he said would be his final warning to Hamas on Wednesday after meeting with a group of hostages that had recently been released from Gaza after spending well over a year in captivity there. The statement read, "Shalom, Hamas," means hello and goodbye. You can choose. Release all of the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you. Only sick and twisted people keep bodies, and you are sick and twisted. I am sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job. Not a single Hamas member will be safe if you don't do as I say. Trump referenced in his recent meeting with the released hostages and how their lives have been destroyed because of the trauma that they had experienced. He concluded, "This is your last warning. For the leadership, now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have a chance. Also to the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead. Make a smart decision. Release the hostages now, or there will be hell to pay later." I actually can't improve on that message. Meanwhile, Trump's special envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, spoke about the war on Thursday, indicating that although negotiations are indeed taking place with Hamas, President Trump will not budge when it comes to getting Hamas out of Gaza. The president has issued a statement about what's acceptable to him and what's not. And hopefully we'll see some good conduct next week, and I'll be able to go in there and have discussions. But I wouldn't test President Trump. Hamas has an opportunity to act reasonably, to do what's right, and then to walk out. They're not going to be part of a government there. Everybody understands that, and that is implicit in the May 27th protocol agreement, pursuant to which these negotiations are happening. But I think they have to understand that. And if they understand that, then they get a path to leave. When it came to the reconstruction plans for Gaza, Witkoff referenced a Wall Street Journal article that stated that it would take between 15 and 20 years to rebuild Gaza, concluding, "So they're finally beginning to agree that people don't belong back there. It's a really dangerous environment for children, for anybody. Unexploded munitions, all kinds of latent ways to get hurt there." In related news, on Tuesday, one of the stars of Friends, David Schwimmer, called on Jews in Hollywood to speak out and stand up against the terrifying rise in anti-Semitism in our country and around the globe. Speaking at the Anti-Defamation League's Anti-Semitism Conference in New York, the 58-year-old actor called out those who have chosen to keep a low profile in the entertainment business, calling on them to speak out now in solidarity with the Jewish community. As you know, speaking out often comes at a cost. Like so many others, I've been attacked and threatened by people I've never met. I've been abandoned by people I thought were friends and by organizations I thought were allies. But I've also found amazing moments of meaning and solidarity. Plenty of people I respect, even some of my heroes in entertainment, music, and sports, have chosen to keep a low profile and sit this one out. I really wish you would stand up. I wish you would speak out because your voice would be so meaningful to your fans who love you, to your community members who need you, to folks who could use just a little solidarity right now from people they respect and look up to. Just say that you stand with your Jewish friends and colleagues and neighbors against hatred and discrimination. Say that what's happening on our college campuses and in our schools and to Jewish-owned businesses is totally unacceptable. Gal Gadot, the star of Wonder Woman, also spoke at the event and said that when she admits that she is Jewish, it's crazy that just saying that, just expressing such a simple fact about who I am, feels like a controversial statement. But sadly, this is where we are today. I am proud to be an Israeli, and I am proud to be Jewish. But this is a time when many of us in the Jewish community have had to find our voice and confront the hatred against us, even if it's extremely uncomfortable. Never did I imagine that on the streets of the United States and different cities around the world, we would see people not condemning Hamas, but celebrating, justifying, and cheering on a massacre of Jews. Here's the thing, however much you tried to avoid it before, even if speaking up wasn't really your thing, none of us can ignore the explosion of Jew hatred around the world anymore. And that's what I'm doing. My name is Gal, and I'm Jewish. And we have had enough of Jew hatred. I stand with both of you, because I too have had enough of it. That was the very reason that I started my podcast last year. I refuse to stand silently by and watch this continue to happen. I will call it out for what it is. Speaking of which, as a follow-up to last week's story about the shameful display that protesters put on at Bernard College, a part of Columbia University, on the day that the funeral was held for Sherry Bibas and her murdered children, where these same cowardly masked protesters sent one school employee to the hospital, on Tuesday morning, President Trump said that his administration would stop all federal funding for schools and universities that allow illegal protests on their campuses. The president added that any foreign agitators who took part in the protests could be deported, while American citizens would face expulsion or arrest. Trump posted, "All federal funding will stop for any college, school, or university that allows illegal protests. Agitators will be imprisoned or permanently sent back to the country from which they came. American students will be permanently expelled or, depending on the crime, arrested. No masks." Thank you for your attention to this matter. The threat could result in a loss of more than $50 million worth of government contracts for Columbia University, and the White House announced that it would review more than $5 billion worth of grants connected to the university in order to ensure that they start protecting their Jewish students' rights. The new Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, said in a statement, "Unlawful encampments and demonstrations have completely paralyzed day-to-day campus operations, depriving Jewish students of learning opportunities to which they are entitled." Columbia said that they would work with the White House, saying, "Columbia is fully committed to combating anti-Semitism and all forms of discrimination, and we are resolute that calling for, promoting, or glorifying violence or terror has no place at our university." Nice words. I want action. The Trump administration followed through on canceling around $400 million worth of federal grants to Columbia University for their continued inaction in the face of persistent harassment of Jewish students. The decision came after an investigation by the administration's Joint Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. Education Secretary Linda McMahon said in the statement, "Since October 7th, Jewish students have faced relentless violence, intimidation, and anti-Semitic harassment on their campuses, only to be ignored by those who are supposed to protect them." Columbia immediately scrambled to restore their lost funding. A university spokesperson said, "We take Columbia's legal obligations seriously and understand how serious this announcement is and are committed to combating anti-Semitism and ensuring the safety and well-being of our students, faculty, and staff." Later, McMahon posted on X that she had a productive meeting with Columbia's interim president, Katrina Armstrong. The administration said that this was only the beginning of their response to campus anti-Semitism. The executive director of the Center for Jewish Student Life at Columbia and Bernard welcomed the move as being a potential catalyst for change, saying, "Columbia has an anti-Semitism crisis, and for months I have worked with faculty, staff, students, parents, and alumni to urge the administration to act quickly to address this crisis. I hope this federal action is a wake-up call to Columbia's administration and trustees." This decision against Columbia is one of the most significant financial penalties that have been imposed on a university over their mishandling of campus protests. It potentially sets a precedent for how the federal government will address similar situations at other institutions. Jumping from one privileged bubble to another, in this case Hollywood, a screenwriter for the biopic Reagan, which starred Dennis Quaid, revealed that the film was ineligible to be considered for Best Picture, the most prestigious prize of the Academy Awards, because it failed to meet the Academy's DEI requirements. We were among 116 films that were eliminated for consideration this year. Obviously, there needs to be a conversation about this policy. The Academy stipulates that any Best Picture nominee must meet 1 out of 4 DEI-focused concepts, which include having a main character come from an underrepresented group, or having at least 30% of all actors in minor roles come from at least 2 underrepresented groups. Another option is to have the main storyline center on an underrepresented group. Alternatively, the film must utilize at least 2 creative leadership positions, such as casting director, cinematographer, costume designer, makeup artist, etc., from underrepresented groups such as women, LGBTQ, or racial and ethnic minorities. A Daily Wire poll conducted in 2021, after the DEI requirements for Best Picture were put into place for the Oscars, found that most Americans oppose them. And speaking of DEI, the Attorney General Pam Bondi warned the American Bar Association on Monday that it should abandon its requirements for law schools to demonstrate a commitment to diversity and inclusion, or expect to face further action from the Justice Department. Speaking of Trump appointees, the Health and Human Services Secretary, RFK Jr., spoke about the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine for children on Sunday as a Mennonite community in Texas faces a measles outbreak. Kennedy wrote a 700-word op-ed for Fox News Digital, urging parents to talk to their doctors about the MMR vaccine for children. According to the Texas Department of Health, 146 measles cases have been identified in the South Plains region since January, mostly among unvaccinated children. One unvaccinated school-age child in the area has died from the respiratory illness, while 20 people have been hospitalized. Kennedy wrote that the decision to vaccinate is a personal one. Vaccines not only protect individual children from measles, but also contribute to community immunity, protecting those who are unable to be vaccinated due to medical reasons. The current Texas outbreak has predominantly affected children, with 116 of the 146 cases occurring in individuals under 18 years of age. The DSHS reports that 79 of the confirmed cases involved individuals who had not received the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine, while 62 cases had unknown vaccine status. At least 5 had received an MMR vaccine. Kennedy added that good nutrition remains a best defense against most chronic and infectious diseases, saying that parents should focus on vitamin-rich and balanced diets. The measles outbreak in Texas is a call to action for all of us to reaffirm our commitment to public health. By working together, parents, healthcare providers, community leaders, and government officials, we can prevent future outbreaks and protect the health of our nation. Under my leadership, HHS is and will always be committed to radical transparency to regain the public's trust in its health agencies. Our First Lady Melania Trump appeared on Capitol Hill in her first solo appearance on Monday and called out Democrats there for not taking on the serious issue of online safety for America's youth by dragging their feet over passing the Take It Down Act that was introduced by Senator Ted Cruz of Texas. The First Lady said that she was there with a common goal to protect our youth from online harm, calling on Congress to pass the act that would criminalize the distribution of non-consensual intimate imagery, including AI-generated deepfake pornography. She stated during a panel discussion with the victims of this type of public sexual violation and abuse that addressing this issue is essential for fostering a safe and supportive environment for our young people. I hope today's roundtable builds awareness of the harm caused by non-consensual intimate imagery and eventually the approval of the Take It Down Act in Congress. I was heartened to learn that Senator Cruz and Senator Klobuchar unified to prioritize this fundamental matter. I must admit, however, I expected to see more Democrat leaders with us here today to address this serious issue. Surely, as adults, we can prioritize America's children ahead of partisan politics. Well, some of us can, and some of us clearly can't, which strongly indicates that those people are unfit to hold their offices and need to be replaced with more mature human beings. Which brings us to the update on Ukraine. At the start of the week, the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky warned the world that a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia was likely very, very far away. But he had also expressed that he was expecting American support to continue during that time. This elicited a stern rebuke from President Trump on Monday in a post to Truth Social, reacting to a report from the Associated Press. This is the worst statement that could have been made by Zelensky, and America will not put up with it for much longer. He then appeared to reference Britain's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who had said that Europe should do the heavy lifting by sending troops to get a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia, while stressing that the effort must have support from the United States to succeed. Trump reacted by saying, "It is what I was saying. This guy doesn't want there to be peace as long as he has American backing." And Europe, in the meeting they had with Zelensky, stated flatly that they cannot do the job without the U.S. Probably not a great statement to have been made in terms of a show of strength against Russia. What are they thinking? The White House stated, "The president has been clear that he is focused on peace. We need our partners to be committed to that goal as well. We are pausing and reviewing our aid to ensure that it is contributing to a solution." The White House also noted that this is not a permanent termination of aid, it's a pause, and they said that the aid may resume at some point. Then Zelensky signaled a shift in his position by posting, "I would like to reiterate Ukraine's commitment to peace. None of us wants an endless war. Ukraine is ready to come to the negotiating table as soon as possible to bring lasting peace closer. Nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. My team and I stand ready to work under President Trump's strong leadership to get a peace that lasts." He also sent Trump a letter saying that he was grateful for all that America had done to preserve Ukrainian sovereignty and that Ukraine was ready to sign the rare earths mineral deal whenever it was convenient. Then on Thursday, the Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent addressed the Economic Club of New York, where he spoke about imposing tough sanctions on Russia in order to force them to come to the negotiating table and bring their 3-year war in Ukraine to an end, saying, "A major factor that has enabled the Russian war machine's continued financing was the Biden administration's egregiously weak sanctions on Russian energy, stemming from worries about upward pressure on U.S. energy prices during an election season. In a craven political move, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan raised the Russian sanctions on the way out the door in January. What was the point of substantial U.S. military and financial support over the past 3 years without a commensurate and fulsome sanction support? This administration has kept the enhanced sanctions in place and will not hesitate to go all in should it provide leverage in peace negotiations. Trump had already issued an executive order that gave the Treasury and Commerce Departments the authority to issue sanctions on international financial institutions that grant loans or other financial assistance to Russia. Bessent also spoke about the sanctions on Iran, promising, "We are going to shut down Iran's oil sector and drone manufacturing capabilities," adding that this will include cutting off the regime's access to the international financial system, saying, "Making Iran broke again will mark the beginning of our updated sanctions policies. If I were an Iranian, I would get all of my money out." Then Friday morning, President Trump confirmed that he is considering sanctions until a peace deal is reached between Russia and Ukraine, posting, "Based on the fact that Russia is absolutely pounding Ukraine on the battlefield right now, I am strongly considering large-scale banking sanctions, and tariffs on Russia until a ceasefire and final settlement agreement on peace is reached. To Russia and Ukraine, get to the table right now before it's too late. Thank you." Back in the United States, there was some sad news this week when country music legend Dolly Parton shared the heartbreaking news on Monday that her husband of nearly 60 years, Carl Dean, had died. He was 82 years old. In a statement, the 79-year-old singer shared, "Carl and I spent many wonderful years together. Words cannot do justice to the love we shared for over 60 years. Thank you for your prayers and sympathy," which we indeed are sending your way, Dolly. Our Second Lady, Usha Vance, announced that she will lead a presidential delegation on Friday to the 2025 Special Olympics Winter Games in Turin, Italy. And Chris Pratt received universal praise this week for proving that real gentlemen still do continue to exist out there, even in Hollywood, where they are often not welcome and are fashionably labeled as toxic. During a press event for their Netflix movie Electric State, Millie Bobby Brown, who was wearing a miniskirt, struggled to get up from her chair without exposing herself. In the video that has since gone viral, the 21-year-old actress leaned over and shared her dilemma with her co-star, and the 45-year-old Guardians of the Galaxy hero rushed to her aid and stepped in front of her to completely block her from the view of the nearby cameras. He also gave the actress his arm with which to steady herself as she got up. This act of chivalry got everyone's attention. Online, one person after another started commenting about what a great guy he is. One person wrote, "Chris Pratt is just a good dude." Another added, "A real and respectful man." A third person posted, "Chris Pratt is a real one. I'm just going to say thank you to the guy for being a gentleman." And another user on X wrote, "Gentlemen still exist." I would just point out that it doesn't require doing something big in today's world to make yourself stand out and impress people. Having a tiny bit of human decency is more than a lot of people have, and that alone will make you stand out from the crowd. As if to prove my point, the state of Florida opened a criminal investigation into Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate after the brothers arrived there last week. The Tates had left Romania after that country had lifted the travel sanctions on them. Now, Florida's Attorney General has revealed this new investigation on Tuesday afternoon. These guys have themselves publicly admitted to participating in what very much appears to be soliciting, trafficking, preying on women around the world. Many of these victims are coming forward, some of them minors. You know, people can spin or defend however they want, but in Florida, this type of behavior is viewed as atrocious. We're not going to accept it. They chose to come here and set their feet down in this state, and we're going to pursue every tool we have within our legal authority to hold them accountable. So we are in the process today. We have secured and executed subpoenas and warrants, and we're going to continue to move forward with the full force of the law. Good. Speaking of doing right by American values, Trump signed an executive order this week making English the official language of the United States of America. He signed another executive order insisting on a mandatory death penalty for anyone who kills a police officer. And in a first in the history of physics, scientists have succeeded in turning light into a supersolid. Sounds kind of cool. Another pretty cool guy, the beloved Argentinian President Javier Milei, agreed to unseal a bunch of records that have been hidden for decades, which will reveal how Credit Suisse and its predecessor banks helped to finance escaping Nazis after World War II so that they could evade justice. The Trump administration celebrated a win of its own after the February jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics was released on Friday. Trump's first full month in office showed that 151,000 jobs were added to the economy in February, including 10,000 new manufacturing jobs. Federal government jobs, on the other hand, declined by 10,000 as a part of the Trump administration's push to slash the size of the government bureaucracy. But there was some unhappy news as well. The Justice Department announced Thursday that Jian Zhou and Li Tian, both active duty Army soldiers, and a former soldier, Ruoyu Duan, had been charged for stealing U.S. military secrets. They are accused of stealing top-secret hard drives, information on weapon systems, and documents on missile defense to sell to individuals based in China. Our Attorney General Pam Bondi said, "The defendants arrested today are accused of betraying our country, actively working to weaken American defense capabilities, and empowering our adversaries in China. They will face swift, severe, and comprehensive justice." FBI Director Kash Patel stated that while bribery and corruption have thrived under China's Communist Party, this behavior cannot be tolerated with our service members who are entrusted with sensitive military information, including national defense information. Brigadier General Rhett Cox of Army Counterintelligence Command added, "These arrests underscore the persistent and increasing foreign intelligence threat facing our Army and nation. Along with the Department of Justice and FBI, Army Counterintelligence Command will continue to work tirelessly to hold those accountable who irresponsibly and selfishly abandon the Army values and choose personal gain over duty to our nation." Also in the judicial realm, a lenient California judge allowed a man who was facing up to 9 years in prison for groping a mother and ripping her clothes off of her before smashing her face with a rock, leaving her permanently disfigured, all of which happened in front of her 13-year-old daughter, to avoid jail time because of his marijuana use and mental health issues, which to me would be reasons for getting him off the streets. Sonoma County Superior Court Judge Dana Simmons sentenced him to just 4 years of probation for the attack. This is not the first time that Judge Simmons has allowed a dangerous offender to avoid prison time. Last February, Juan Garcia Virgil was convicted of a DUI 5 different times. On his 4th conviction, instead of jail time, Simmons sentenced him to probation. Virgil was then convicted of a 5th DUI, but again, Simmons only sentenced him to probation. So why is she still allowed to be on the bench if she is useless when it comes to doing her job? Oh, that's right, because it's California. In better news, 3 more FEMA employees have been fired as part of the agency's investigation into guidelines from a supervisor last year for relief workers in Florida to avoid homes advertising Trump. But the biggest story of the week was the State of the Union address. I have to say, this was the first time that I wasn't bored while watching this. In an absolutely electric speech, in which Donald Trump was clearly enjoying himself and having some fun, the Democrats, who seem these days to be incapable of not coming across as weirdly out of touch, brought props with them to the halls of Congress. Their weapon of choice was a bunch of signs that looked like auction paddles, printed with random and uncoordinated slogans that protested everything that they were upset about, but they seemed to lack any coordinated juice regarding a specific issue. And it showed. Instead, it was clear that this was opposition for the sake of opposition itself, and without any specific grievances, they were still there to oppose the man himself, which just made them look very petty and childish. No one ended up hearing a single syllable of what they had to say, because every time they performatively interrupted the President of the United States giving the State of the Union address, they were drowned out by half of Congress, who would begin shouting them down with chants of USA. But Democrats, as ever, couldn't take the hint. So after 2 warnings, the Speaker of the House ordered the Sergeant-at-Arms to remove the troublesome Congressman Al Green of Texas, and he was immediately forgotten by the most enthused crowd I've ever seen at a State of the Union address. It was inescapably clear to everyone present, as well as to those watching at home, that Trump had been right when he said that the sullen Congress members on the left couldn't be pleased, and they wouldn't be happy even if he cured a deadly disease. And except for a few boos and some people who made spectacles of themselves by standing up and turning their backs on him until they too were eventually removed, all of which happened off camera so no one noticed, much less was impressed. And the rest of them fell right into Trump's trap by doing exactly what he had predicted they would do, pouting in stony silence for the rest of the speech and sullenly refusing to clap for anything, even for things that it made them look really bad to oppose. They looked very childish and petty in putting their personal dislike for one individual over being professional enough to support the good of the American people, where it would have been appropriate. Still, nothing they did succeeded in dampening the infectious mood of celebration that characterized the event, and they were mostly ignored, to be honest. At least until Trump got in one small but deserved jab by asking them how trying to prosecute him had worked out for them. He began the speech by proclaiming America is back, saying our spirit is back, our pride is back, our confidence is back, and the American dream is surging, bigger and better than ever before. The American dream is unstoppable, and our country is on the verge of a comeback, the likes of which the world has never witnessed, and perhaps will never witness again. He declared, our country will be woke no longer, and pointed to the revolution of common sense that has been sweeping the country and the wider Western world, saying, we will never go back. Never. By being completely unreasonable, as Trump had predicted that they would be, the left ended up removing the last threadbare incentive for the opposition to be led by an attitude of trying to be reconciliatory, or nice, or to really care about what they had to say, or to make trying to please them a factor going forward. Trump prophesied that by clinging to their unpopular ideology above the interests of the people that they are supposed to be representing, their voting record on the issues that people care about will lead to them being voted out of office and replaced, and soon. An example of that would be their opposing ending the truly unbelievable waste of the people's tax dollars. Trump listed over $24.5 billion worth of examples of said insane waste and abuse that DOGE has already uncovered in the government, including $8 million to promote LGBTQI+ in the African nation of Lesotho, which nobody's ever heard of. $60 million for indigenous people and Afro-Colombian empowerment in Central America. $8 million to make mice transgender, which we will circle back to. He concluded these examples by listing the number of people over the age of 100, 130, and even 150 years old who were still fraudulently in the Social Security system. Trump declared, the days of unelected bureaucrats are over. And however much Democrats may dislike it, that sentiment reflects the mood of the vast majority of the American people. After a standing ovation from the right side of the chamber for Laken Riley's mother and sister who were present, Trump boasted about already achieving the lowest numbers at the border in recorded history, calling out the lie of the Biden administration who said that they needed new legislation to be able to do anything about the crisis there. The media and our friends in the Democrat Party kept saying we needed new legislation to secure the border, but it turned out that all we really needed was a new president. Trump also showed the newly signed order that renamed a beautiful wildlife preserve dedicated to the memory of Jocelyn, the 12-year-old girl in Houston who was kidnapped and then sexually tortured for hours before being murdered by an illegal alien from Venezuela. The young girl's mother, Alexis, was also present for that moment, honoring the memory of her daughter's short life on this earth. The sweetest moment, however, came when Trump gave a 13-year-old boy named DJ, who has survived dozens of surgeries while fighting the brain cancer that he has had since the age of 6, a brave little boy who dreams of becoming a police officer one day and who has been made an honorary deputy chief by a number of law enforcement agencies already. And Trump surprised him with a promotion that night by making him an honorary Secret Service agent. The little boy's eyes widened in thrilled surprise as he threw his arms around the neck of the beaming Secret Service director for a long hug, while he received a heartfelt standing ovation. From the right side of the chamber, anyway. The side full of the self-declared compassionate people were busy rolling their eyes at the smile of joy on the face of the child who is bravely fighting for his life against a terminal condition. Not a good look. But with no need to step on eggshells for people who are that far gone, Trump called out the harmful trans ideology that has been pushed on children by the left who tell them that they were born in the wrong body, while Trump said, "Our message to every child in America is that you are perfect, exactly the way God made you." Another emotional moment came when Trump was able to personally give the happy news to a young man named Justin Hartley, who had lost his police officer father as a young boy, that he had achieved his dream of being accepted into West Point. And I was personally thrilled about the announcement that America will soon resume its shipbuilding industry, which is very good news for our Navy, which has been allowed to grow old and who currently needs a lot of replacements in order to maintain their control over the world's seas. Trump also announced the capture of the Islamic terrorist behind the Abbey Gate bombing. He is being transported to the United States to face the swift sword of American justice. And in front of his wife and 2 daughters who were present, Trump paid a moving tribute to Corey Competore, the heroic firefighter who was tragically killed in Butler, Pennsylvania by the assassin who was aiming for Trump. Trump also pointed to the recent polls which show that Americans are feeling more positive about where the country is headed. Now, for the first time in modern history, more Americans believe that our country is headed in the right direction than the wrong direction, an astonishing record 27-point swing since Election Day alone. The president concluded with a rousing message about building America's golden age, saying that we have the privilege of standing on the shoulders of the men who contributed absolutely colossal achievements to the world, and Trump promised that we are on the cusp of doing even greater and more inspiring things than they achieved, declaring that we have only just begun. By the end, the Democrats were glum and defeated. They had given up on their empty theatrics and put down their auction paddles. They had been unable to gain control of the night or even to lessen the enthusiasm that was palpable even on the other side of the screen. Many of them had slunk away one by one and snuck out before the speech ended. In their determination to oppose Trump, they had refused to applaud a kid with cancer, the capture of a terrorist, or the safe return of an American hostage, Mark Fogel, etc. It truly only made them look bad. That as Americans, they didn't celebrate our hostages being returned, or terrorists who have killed us and who mean us harm being captured, or kids who survived terminal cancer and are beaming because they just had a wish come true. You should support those things regardless of Trump. If you don't, if you oppose Trump so much that you oppose those things as part of opposing him, it doesn't make him look bad. It makes you look bad, really bad, to everyone, conservatives, moderates, and liberals alike. I really believe that people will look back on this night as the final nail in the coffin of the Democrat Party in terms of them having any power for the coming years. It's going to be a long winter for them with the image that they stamped themselves with that night. They are so lost right now that they can't even manage to navigate away from the behavior and positions that keep turning more and more people off to them. And worse, their behavior has made the majority of people casually dismiss Democrats as having become a group of truly ridiculous people that are too bizarre to take seriously or to even think of seriously as the opposition. And if people don't take you seriously, if you are the legitimate butt of every joke and lightly brushed off, you're doomed as a political party. As if to prove how out of touch the leftists have become, CNN's polls showed that 70% of Americans, including conservatives, moderates, and liberals, liked the speech that Trump gave. A CBS poll showed more than 75% of Americans approved. Democrat Senator John Fetterman torched his own party for their antics that night, saying that they amounted to a sad cavalcade of self-owns and unhinged petulance. It only makes Trump look more presidential and restrained. We're becoming the metaphorical car alarms that nobody pays attention to. And it may not be the winning message. True.
There's a reason why congressional Democrats have like a 20% approval rating, and even amongst their own party has like a 40%, the lowest Quinnipiac has ever measured. And I think last night and sort of what's been going on over the past few months is a gosh darn good illustration of that.
Agreed.
I mean, that's CNN. Less than half of Democrats like Democrats. 20% of mainstream America is on their side at this point. I mean, if that's not a wake-up call for your party, I don't know what is. Circling back around to what President Trump said during his address about $8 million to make mice transgender, CNN threw out a hasty fact check saying that he had falsely claimed that DOJ had identified $8 million for making mice transgender. They then cited $477,121 in government funding for 3 projects that involved giving estrogen to monkeys to test how it would affect their susceptibility to HIV. But that clearly wasn't what Trump was talking about. The White House responded with a fact sheet of their own, which cited 6 different studies that involved mice and gender ideology, all funded by the NIH and costing American taxpayers a total of over $8 million, just like Trump had said. The first 4-year study treated male and female mice with estrogen and cost the taxpayers $3.1 million. Another study cost us over $1.2 million. It used mice to explore how testosterone affects the reproductive systems of transgender males, meaning biological women who take testosterone. The third study tested gender-affirming hormone therapy on mice by injecting male mice with estrogen and female mice with testosterone. That study cost the taxpayers $750,000. The fourth study used mice to explore how taking testosterone affects breast cancer in the underserved transmasculine community, meaning biological women who identify as male. That study cost just under $300,000. The fifth study spent $2.5 million to give mice puberty blockers and testosterone in order to explore their effects on the reproductive systems of trans-identifying females. It found that the mice manifested defects in ovarian architecture, and they also saw changes in the reproductive egg development. The final study developed a mouse model of gender-affirming hormone therapy to test the immune responses of cis versus trans mice to HIV vaccines. That study began last year and cost the taxpayers almost $500,000. So the White House just schooled CNN and their so-called fact checkers. 2 days after the speech, the Republican-led House of Representatives officially censored Al Green of Texas for his outburst during President Trump's address that had led to him being removed from the chamber for refusing to follow congressional protocol after being repeatedly warned. The official censor was somewhat bipartisan in nature, with 10 Democrats joining the 214 Republicans in voting to pass the censure resolution. 2 Democrats abstained by voting present. The final vote was 224 to 198 to 2. The rest of the Democrats just continued to dig their unserious performative hole by claiming, you guessed it, racism, for which they spontaneously burst into an off-key rendition of "We Shall Overcome" as their official reaction to the censure. I give up. You can't be saved. Whatever. And I say that as someone who, to my shame, voted for Biden. Don't know what to tell you. It was later reported that the Democrat representative of Texas, Sylvester Turner, died Tuesday night after attending the president's address to Congress. Turner was 70 years old and had just started his first term in Congress after taking the place of the late Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee. And just as I was about to wrap up, a couple of news stories broke, so I'm going to go ahead and throw those in here. The wife of a correctionals officer in New York was not able to get her chemo treatment for a rare terminal illness last week after the Democrat governor, Kathy Hochul, terminated the health insurance coverage for thousands of officers and their dependents over the ongoing prison guard strike that we covered last week. News 10 NBC's Jennifer Luke reported that Hochul has terminated health care for thousands of officers so far, although, notably, the Attica Correctional Facility officer whose wife needs the chemo treatment was not part of the strike. He was out on family and medical leave in order to take care of his family following his wife's diagnosis. Aren't Democrats supposed to be pro-healthcare for all? Only unless you can wield it as a club to bully people, I guess. And at least 530 people have reportedly been massacred in Syria during the last 3 days in the coastal provinces of Tartus and Latika by the forces of the jihadist government there. Videos showing the jihadis brutally hunting these people down on the streets are apparently circulating online. And because I can't bring myself to end on that story, the Health and Human Services Secretary, RFK Jr., is continuing to advance the Make America Healthy Again movement. He will reportedly be meeting this week with top executives from major food brands, according to the Daily Wire. RFK is expected to meet with executives from General Mills, PepsiCo, and other big-name food brands on Monday, according to a Politico report. President Trump reportedly wants all department heads to meet with the leaders of the industries that they will oversee. Kennedy has voiced concerns about seed oils, dyes, preservatives, and other ingredients found in processed food. Reports suggest that the food companies will be on board with some related changes, though it's expected that there will be a lot of pushback over axing seed oils since they are so inexpensive and versatile. Additionally, due to conflicts of interest, RFK is preparing to remove several members of the external ACIP committee that advises the FDA and CDC on vaccine approvals and other key public health decisions. I've said before, I am a major supporter of the MAHA movement. I want these conflicts of interest shut down and a commitment to making as much information as we have available to the public so that they can make the choices that are right for them when it comes to their own health. So I absolutely support what Bobby is doing in that field right now so far. That's it for this week. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, please like and follow because that does make these things successful. And I hope you come back next week. Until then, have a good week, my friends.